Good day to you. My name is Jonathan Harkless. My argument today is some form of gun control just makes sense. The Second Amendment of the United States Constitution reads, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Today, the people of this great nation seem to ignore that this amendment begins by stating a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. Our forefathers could not have imagined the size of our nation today. The United States population was approximately 4 million people when the Constitution was signed. The population has now increased to more than 321 million citizens. That's more than a 7,000% increase. It only makes sense that the laws would reflect the populace or the size of the current populace. The United States Constitution in itself is the oldest and shortest written constitution of any major government in the world. A new, common sense, gun safety and control measure to govern the size of our current populace and the number of guns in the U.S. calls for amending the Constitution. Our politicians owe us an improvement of the oldest and shortest written constitution of any major government in the world. Our forefathers did an outstanding job in setting the foundation for our nation. We are owed amendments, a growth to that foundation. Let's examine the wording of the Second Amendment and the establishment of the National Guard, the amount of weapons owned in the U.S. and who owns them compared to the rest of the world, the influence of the National Rifle Association and their lobbyists, and the impact of automatic weapons in society, and why it just makes sense to have some form of gun control. Let's begin by looking at the language of the Second Amendment, because it can be somewhat confusing. Now, the right protected by the text is limited in two ways. It applied only to keeping and bearing arms for military purposes. At the time that the Second Amendment was written, there was a fear of the people that the government would use soldiers to oppress them. Therefore, the writing, a well-regulated militia being necessary, the Second Amendment was placed into the Constitution, and the people were trained, somewhat like the Army Reserve does today, on maybe weekends, were trained how to use weapons and how to defend themselves in case of the attempt to be oppressed by the military. Now, this well-regulated militia has now been established and is called the National Guard. It now gives the state the right to execute our forefathers' greatest fear, because they can now establish martial law, and the right of the citizen to bear arms that we are using as our constitutional right to bear as many weapons as we want to. The right of the citizens to bear arms would be infringed by the National Guard should there be martial law. You cannot take up your weapons against the Guard. Gun ownership in the United States. No civilian population in the world is more powerfully armed than the United States. Yemen is the closest, with only half the ownership of the United States. There are nearly 300 million privately owned firearms in the U.S. That's almost one firearm to every citizen. However, even though the United States is the country with the highest rate of civilian gun ownership in the world, most Americans do not own a gun. Most Americans do not own a weapon. Yet we have 300 million of them in our society. That's because 3/4 of the people with guns own 2 or more. And they can thank the NRA or the National Rifle Association for keeping that intact. The NRA has at present a paying membership of more than 5 million people, and it represents tens of millions more American citizens. Being able to deliver millions of votes gives the NRA massive political clout. And they use that clout in getting directly involved in combating further gun measures through legislation. And they combat automatic and semi-automatic weapon use. The right to. Well, the impact of automatic and semi-automatic weapon use in America, if you don't know what an automatic weapon is considered, a fully automatic weapon or a machine gun is one that fires a succession of bullets as long as the trigger is depressed. A machine gun can normally fire between 7 and 17 rounds per second, or between 400 and 1,000 bullets per minute. Now, I don't know if you've ever been hunting or if you like to go to the range, but I've never been hunting where I had to discharge that amount of bullets, from 400 to 1,000 bullets at one time. And never at a range have I had a desire to discharge 400 or 1,000 bullets per minute. Assault weapons were used in 24.6% of mass shootings, and handguns were used in 48% of them. The gun industry has militarized the civilian market with 3 major types of firearms: high-capacity handguns, assault rifles, pistols, and sniper rifles. The idea that every man can be his own policeman has come to life in America. Gun lobbyists spend millions of dollars to perpetuate the right to bear arms as the need or privilege to own multiple automatic handguns and rifles. When untrained, unsupervised, undisciplined individuals own an unlimited amount of various weapons and ammunition, it creates a greater potential for mass shootings, senseless murders, and urban warfare. As a soldier in the United States Army, when ordered by the president to do so, we had to go to war. When assigned to combat, a soldier is given one M16A1 rifle. An NCO or above is given a sidearm and a bayonet. And a soldier swears to protect his country, to die for his country on foreign or domestic soil with that one weapon. Yet, today, again, we are faced with untrained, unsupervised, undisciplined individuals who create mass shootings, urban warfare, senseless murders. This is our reality in America today. This is the America that we live in. This was not the vision of our forefathers when the Second Amendment was drafted. The American citizen today is much different than when our Constitution was written. Amending the Constitution, and that includes amending an amendment, is a political undertaking that we are owed as American citizens in the year 2016. The demand for change must be based on the needs and the ideas of 300 million citizens and their safety. To continue to stand only on the great ideas of the founding fathers, the foundation, which is the Constitution of the United States, to continue to stand only on that foundation is a disservice by our politicians to the American people. We should no longer allow the propaganda of special interests or their political influence to dictate our safety needs. Should mass murder be a price we pay for living in a society where personal freedom is so highly valued? Should that be the price that we pay for our personal freedom? Semi-automatic weapons are civilian versions of automatic military assault rifles and automatic military pistols. The world's armies develop assault weapons to meet specific combat needs, not the need or use of the average American citizen. Mass shooters are not the crazed killers sometimes pictured on TV. It's the guy down the street. It's the guy over in the next cubicle. The person that you passed in the mall. The person that you passed on the street. That couple next door. It's not the crazed killer with a specific way of killing. It is our neighbors that are sold thousands of rounds of ammunition, multiple assault weapons, without having to be accounted for, or without having to provide a reason for. The reality is that the gun industry is not today, if it ever was, a sporting industry. It is a highly militarized and increasingly cynical industry that has cast all restraint aside to generate profit from military-style firearms. We, the people of today's United States, should declare it only makes sense to control guns so that we are not controlled by them. It is unfortunate that a candid discussion about guns is nearly impossible today because of propaganda of special interest groups. Gun control advocates say that the answer to gun violence is fewer guns. Gun rights advocates say that the answer is more guns. Fewer guns in the wrong hands will not control violence. More guns in the wrong hands could not either. It's the person who possesses the weapon that is the threat. The person or persons with the weapons are the ones that we have to gain control of. It only makes sense. God bless America.